You'll never want to watch corn again after hearing my shameful story. Now, this is a type of video that I've never done before. It will be completely uncensored. There won't be a single cut in this video. It's the first time I try this, but I feel like it's really important when you make a video like this. So I'll just go through my whole story and just listen as you wish. You can stop scroll like the video right now, scroll to another video. It will probably be more entertaining. We're gonna talk about some deep stuff here. So I'm gonna just go straight in. I started watching Korn at 9 years old. The first time I ever watched it was on my DS. So I was in my living room, my parents were in the other room, and I had this little Nintendo DS thing. And I scrolled to the internet section and I just wrote sex. I go to images and I'm just like blown away by what that even is. Keep in mind, I had never masturbated at that moment. So I watched Korn before even knowing what masturbation is. And it was exciting for some reason. I was curious for some reason, but I didn't understand why. Eventually, a few months later, I started masturbating without Korn. And then at about 11 years old is the first time I actually masturbated while watching Korn. Now, I remember a lot of people ask me, when did you know it was a problem? When did you know it wasn't right and you wanted to quit? My answer is the first time. The first time I ever watched it, I already felt this extreme shame. I remember my mom was like, Danny, what's going on? And I was just crying and crying and crying, and I didn't tell her, but I was crying and crying out of shame. So I already knew it was off. But, I told myself, never gonna do it again, never again, never again. Next thing you know, a few weeks later, boom, I'm watching it. That pattern kept on going for most of my teenage years. Matter of fact, almost all of them. I mean, at 13 years old, I remember I had a moment, it was my birthday, and I was like, like people do New Year's resolutions. I did a birthday resolution. So I was like, it's the last time I'll ever watch it. I'll never watch it again. A few weeks later, I'm back. And that, again, pattern. I was 16 when I got my first girlfriend. Before that, every single summer, me and my best friend, especially on my side, I always told him, brother, this summer is when I get my dick sucked. This summer is when I get my dick sucked. And it was every summer, and guess what? It never happened. Until the summer when I turned 16. I was 16. And I was turning 17 actually, but it was right before 17. I finally had my first girlfriend. I started posting that content online. It wasn't about any self-improvement back then. It was literally thirst traps. It was literally me just doing it to attract women. Now 95% of my audience is men. Back then it was the opposite. It was women. And so I get this girlfriend and we see each other every week. We make out and all that stuff. And now about a month later, it's finally the moment. It's the moment I'm gonna get my dick sucked. It's planned. I'm ready. This moment I've been waiting for years. So we make out for hours, and now is the moment that we make it happen. Guess what? I cannot even get hard. By the way, every time I tell this story, people tell me, oh my God, same. So it's something common, right? So at this point, most of y'all are probably like, oh yeah, it happened to me too. Or if you never had sex or whatever, if you're still in your younger years or whatever, it could happen and it's okay. It's actually something common. So, I know it's common, but my ego also is completely destroyed. Because I'm like, bro, I've visualized that moment for years. How the hell am I not able to get hard? She took it super well though. She didn't put any pressure, all that stuff. It was all in my head, all the ego. I didn't understand why that was happening at that moment, but I'm going to come back to it and you're going to understand how it's related to Korn. So, during that whole week, I'm like, I'm a little insecure. I'm in my head a lot. And we see each other a week later. Second try, attempt number 2. Now I managed to get hard a little bit. She starts doing it, boom. While she's doing it, I get soft. Maybe 3-4 days later, we break up because of me. I cheated on her online. not in person. I cheated on her online. Now, the reason I'm telling this story, because after that, we're talking like, it just, I was so ashamed that it unlocked this whole like era. It was about a year, maybe 2 years, a year and a half, maybe, of just like existential crisis and just pure shame. And it just went downhill. It wasn't just because of that. I was just in such a low frequency. I was ashamed. I was so insecure. I was regretful. And it was just like, it's this never ending cycle. And as I was going through that, I was watching more and more corn. Now, looking back, I can see that number one, the reason I couldn't get hard is because of performance anxiety, which happens to a lot of young men, unfortunately, and it happens more and more. The only correlation that even experts can see is because of corn. You grow up, your first experience of sex is internet corn. Think about it this way. Your ancestors, for tens of thousands of years, their first experience of sex was in person, obviously. Now, the average age of first exposure is 11. Obviously, the average age of the first time people have sex is about 16. So the average age of first exposure to corn is 5 years before the average first exposure to real life sex. You get 5 years of conditioning about what sex means through internet corn. Again, even for our parents, it wasn't that bad because they had access to magazines, they had access to freaking VHS tapes, whatever. It wasn't that hardcore, it wasn't that accessible, it wasn't that unlimited. There weren't so many categories on there. And now we learn about sexuality through internet corn. So that completely shifted my expectations, what it should be like, and it created all these performance anxiety, and I couldn't get hard. Now my reaction to it is the biggest problem. That's already a big problem, because young men aren't supposed to have that much problem getting hard. That's not how we were designed in nature. Now, the way I reacted to it, my ego, the reaction was just completely exaggerated. Why? Because I had associated so much of my worth as a man to my performance. Once again, where is that built from? A big part of it is corn, but also the impact it has had on society. It doesn't end there. It doesn't end there. So the more ashamed I become, the more I cope with it, because corn, by the way, is just a coping mechanism. So it's just a way for you to escape difficult emotions and meet a certain emotional need you have. You just learned that it's the easiest, most accessible, it's free, low effort. Boom. That's how a lot of men cope with their difficult emotions. So I watch corn more and more and more. I get down. I basically believe I will never be able to be hard again while I'm freaking jerking off to corn. It's just this mess. Next thing you know, I eventually go on a vacation and I meet a girl there. Now, God blessed me in that moment because it was such a powerful connection that I kind of forgot about all my problems. And the second night that I met her on vacation, we got drunk. Now, that's what I'm saying. Do not take this as advice. I do not recommend this. It worked for me. It worked for some guys I know, but it's not advice I'm giving. But since when you drink alcohol, you give less fucks, next thing you know, I was able to be hard, and then that was my actual first time that it worked. That girl eventually became my girlfriend. It was a long-term relationship, a long-distance relationship, but as I was with her, I was fucking jerking off to corn all the time. And one of my big fantasies that got built over this period of time, one of my big fetishes was actually cheating, homewreckers, all of that taboo stuff. Now, from the perspective I have, looking back, I can understand why I had this. And it was only when I understood why and I started deconstructing it that I was able to free myself from that fantasy. Because, by the way, very often people suffer more from the fantasy that is created out of corn than from actually corn itself. And that was the case for me. So it always created these deep problems in my relationships. It was always chaos. Now I understand. To me, it represented this form of freedom, independence, risk. I love adventure, so like that's what it meant for me at that moment. A sense of significance, all of that stuff, all of these needs. And so yeah, I was watching these videos. So obviously, didn't make the relationship very healthy. It was a good relationship. I learned a lot, but it didn't last very long. I didn't cheat. None of that stuff. It doesn't end there. Next thing you know, we break up. I go in this kind of phase where I have a lot of sex with a lot of different girls. And that's when I'm like, okay. That's when I discovered the no-fap journey. And actually, not when I discovered it, but when I started taking it seriously. So I committed. No more jerking off. But like for real. That was probably the most serious. It was through the 75 hard challenge. And so I went on these little mini streaks, like 3-4 days. To me, it was already a big win. And I was so horny that I was compensating with sex with all these girls. Again, like that is better than freaking jerking off to corn. That's for sure. It's better. It's a phase. It's a phase. But it's not the end goal. It's not the end game. At least in my opinion. And so I was consistently chasing sex. And I was fortunate enough to get it, which was cool. A lot of guys are stuck in that cycle, but they don't get it. So that's cool. But I eventually meet my most recent ex. So I spoiled a little bit the story here, but my most recent ex, it was also my longest relationship. So I meet her, everything is amazing, big connection, boom, we vibe. A few months later, I cheat on her. Online. Again, online. It's still cheating. I do believe there's different levels to the game, but it's still cheating. So I cheat on her online. Again. And now I'm like, okay, something's going on here. I need to deal with my bullshit. And it's not going to work just trying to pretend it's not there, just resisting. I have to do some deep, deep work. And it's in that phase of my life that I uncovered the first steps of everything I'm teaching now. That was the first phase. It was a very important phase. I went for a very long time without corn. Matter of fact, it was more than a year. And, you know, I was still masturbating, but I went without corn for a very long time. Then what happened is I went on a trip with one of my boys. It was a monk mode. And what happened there is I was away from her for 4 months. No, in the middle we saw each other, so it was okay. But for 2 months I was away from her. And it was the first time ever since I was on that journey of, you know, recovery that I was away from sex for a very long time. And that's when I relapsed. I started watching it again. It created a lot of shame. It created a lot of problems. But we were still okay. It kind of worked. It was okay. Then, a few months later, I decided again, it's over. I'm done. So I go on a pretty long streak as well. I go on a trip again, and the same thing happens. And a few weeks later, not just because of that, for many different reasons, but that was probably one of them. Definitely it influenced the low quality of the relationship at that moment, obviously. We broke up. And that triggered the most important period of growth in my life, alongside with my darkest period as well. It just like unleashed so much pain and it was such a difficult breakup for me. It lasted a very long time. And all of this time I was coping with corn. Again, I was coping with corn. That's when I discovered also adult entertainers. But, you know, I didn't pay for them. Thank God, I never paid. But I was flirting with them and trying to get some nudes for free, and I was just in this never-ending cycle. I discovered some platforms I'm not gonna name because I don't want to give you guys ideas, but platforms that it's like a kind of a social media mixed with corn. So it's like there was this whole social aspect, and that lasted for months. And the worst part about that is, as I was teaching the guys, as I was coaching men on that exact subject, I was struggling behind the scenes. And that's when I realized, I felt the pain in the gap between who you pretend to be and who you really are when no one's watching. And it is one of the most uncomfortable, disturbing, horrible feelings you could possibly have. And now in retrospect, I see it as a blessing in disguise. Every single part of this story is a blessing in disguise. Every single one of them. Why? Because I believe life happens for you. And pain will leave once it is done teaching you. Pain is a lesson. And I say the same thing. The relapses will stop when they're done teaching you. So, where was I going with that? Yes, I discovered the pain that so many fathers, husbands, leaders, pastors, there's a crazy statistic where more than 50% of pastors jerk off to corn every week. It's completely ridiculous. Executive leaders, every person, coaches like me, every single person who's in a position of influence is susceptible to experience that pain. Because you have to maintain this image, you have to maintain this position of leadership. But if you don't deal with your bullshit in the background, that whole gap is created. And it fucking sucks. It's horrible. And it's just there sitting fucking killing you until you take care of it. And that's what I did. And that's why I'm saying it's probably, maybe it's a bias of like the recent bias, but I think it's really the most important part of my life. And that breakup truly is one of the greatest blessings of my life. It's crazy to say, but such a gift. I'm so grateful right now. Okay, I won't be too cheesy. I will come back to the point. So good. So I learned so many lessons, and that's when I dove even deeper into the whole game. And that was phase 2. That's when I started having more clients, getting them more results, because I understood it on a deeper level. And I was more relatable as well. Because I've been through all of that bullshit. I've been through all of that bullshit. And that's where we're at today. That's where we're at today. I'm super grateful after all of that. And my most popular video on this channel is 5 reasons why corn addiction is actually a blessing. Why I'm grateful for corn addiction. What I always tell people is that addiction recovery is the biggest blessing a man could ever go through. There's so much pain. It sucks so much. There's so much suffering. But when you finally get through it, the amount of wisdom, the character you built, the amount of gratitude you have, the contrast, the compassion, the depth, oh my God, the person you become, it's so worth it. It's so worth it. So if you're on that journey right now, just know it's going to be worth it. Have faith. It's happening for you. There's a reason why you're watching this video right now. Come on now. I don't know how many views this video will get. Maybe freaking 20. Who knows? But these 20 people that are watching, especially those who watch until the end, it's happening for you. You got this. I love you. It's only the beginning. It's only the beginning. All right. Thank you for listening to that whole thing. Wow. I'm so grateful for you. Mwah!